What happens to a photograph after it goes viral? When a photograph goes viral, something strange happens to it. At first, it feels like success. More views, more shares, more attention. But behind that surface, something more complicated begins. Because a viral image does not stay in its original form. It starts to transform. The moment a photograph spreads beyond its original audience, context begins to weaken. What the photographer intended becomes less visible. What the subject experienced becomes less known. And what remains is the image itself, floating freely across millions of screens. At that point, the photograph stops belonging to a single moment. It starts belonging to the internet. And the internet does not preserve meaning. It reshapes it. One of the first changes happens through repetition. The more an image is shared, the more it becomes familiar. And when something becomes familiar, people stop seeing it carefully. They start scanning it instead of observing it. Meaning becomes compressed. Details begin to disappear. And the image slowly turns into a simplified version of itself. Sometimes even into a symbol. Then comes reinterpretation. Different communities begin to assign their own meaning to the same image. Some focus on emotion. Some focus on aesthetics. Some remove context entirely and create new narratives around it. And none of these interpretations are controlled by the original creator. This is where viral images begin to drift away from intention. Not because something is wrong, but because scale changes perception. At a small level, a photograph is experienced slowly. At a large scale, it is experienced instantly. And speed changes understanding. Another important shift happens through repetition across platforms. A single image can appear on multiple sites, reposted and re-edited, often without attribution or explanation. Each repost slightly alters how it is seen. Sometimes it is cropped. Sometimes it is captioned differently. Sometimes it is placed next to unrelated content. And every change reshapes meaning in small but powerful ways. Over time, the original photograph becomes harder to locate in its pure form. Even if the image itself remains unchanged, its context does not. And context is what gives photography much of its emotional weight. Without context, an image becomes open-ended. It can be interpreted in ways the photographer never considered. This is why viral images often feel different from how they originally appeared. They no longer belong to one story. They become many stories at once. There is also a psychological effect on viewers. When an image is everywhere, people begin to assume they understand it quickly. They stop questioning it. They stop looking deeply. Familiarity replaces curiosity, and the photograph becomes part of visual noise. But at the same time, virality also gives an image something it never had before. Scale, reach, and cultural impact. A photograph that might have been seen by a few people in a gallery can suddenly be seen by millions across the world. It can influence conversation. It can shape opinion. It can become part of cultural memory. So viral transformation is not purely loss or gain. It is both at the same time. Loss of control, gain of reach, loss of context, gain of visibility. And in that tension, the identity of the photograph changes. Because once an image goes viral, it no longer exists in a single version. It exists in many interpretations, many contexts, and many perceptions at once. And the original meaning becomes only one layer among many. So the real question is not just what happens to a photograph after it goes viral. It is this. What does a photograph become when it is no longer seen in one place, but everywhere at once? Because at that point, the image is no longer just something you created. It is something the world continues to recreate.